All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our first ever AMA, for our first ever open online challenge. I think hopefully you all know who I am. I'm Justin Donifif, the HAPS Program Manager. You should have gotten a ton of emails from me. Hopefully you watched the video I sent out introducing the challenge. We have the challenge brief video up as well, so hopefully you've all had a chance to look at that. I know a good portion of you are currently on the DIN, posting ideas, reviewing ideas, talking to people. You're also on Microsoft Teams. I also know a good portion of you are not on the DIN and or are not on Teams, and maybe are trying to figure out if this is something that you want to participate in. So hopefully this AMA will help you get to the point of wanting to join us. So with that, I'm going to jump into some of the logistics of the AMA and kind of talk about the challenge a little bit. Then I'm going to ask all of our mentors to introduce themselves in about 10 seconds because we've got a lot of content to cover. We've received 22 questions yesterday that I posted for the mentors to respond to today. I know some others came in overnight, and if your question that came in overnight or you've got a question, please feel free to submit it via the Q&A panel, and we'll go through there and see if we can answer those. So we've got a lot of content to review, so hopefully we'll get through it all. So welcome. This is going to be hopefully first of several AMAs that we do for this challenge. This is kind of serving as our kickoff event. Normally we would have a big challenge briefing as part of an in-person hackathon, and you kind of get to meet all the mentors, you get to meet me, we get to talk about the challenge, and we can start creating those human connections. So hopefully we get through this and you guys get a little bit more invested in what we're doing, and you get really excited about it and start coming up with some really good ideas for how to solve the challenge. So with that, I'd like to encourage you all to join the DIN. So there's links floating around, innovatedefense.net /DU/DUE challenge. Please go there, check out the ideas, check out the resources. There's links for how to get on Microsoft Teams. From there, you're going to be able to start interacting and start having some conversations and hopefully spurring some ideas among all of you. We have gotten a few questions on sort of logistical matters. I am going to write up a separate response to the logistical questions that came in as part of the AMA session so that we can retain most of the time to respond to sort of the challenge-based questions that the mentors can respond to. But I want to start off with a few pieces of guidance sort of on the logistics of the event. So first of all, everyone should really be starting with the challenge as they approach this. So there's a challenge statement, there's a challenge briefing video, there's documents that talk about the nature of the challenge that we're experiencing inside of DoD regarding situational awareness in dense urban environments. That should be sort of front and center, the focus that you have as you approach the challenge and start thinking about the ideas of the things that you want to create, the things you want to work on, or if you have an existing technology, how to apply that technology to the problem. It's not really about, here's my solution, do you want to buy it? It's here's an idea that I have, here's a solution that I have. How can we make this work for you given the challenge that you're facing? So it is perfectly okay if you have existing technologies. We are definitely interested in hearing about those and learning about those. We definitely want to see if there's something that is already available that we could start using right away. That's really appealing to us. But we're also interested in learning about new ideas. Like, is there something totally revolutionary that we've never thought about that you've got, in the back of your mind, in front of your mind, hopefully, that could be totally revolutionary to how we approach this problem. So I'm really going to encourage you guys to come forward if you have a new idea and talk about that and try to flesh it out with the mentors, try to flesh it out with each other, and see where you can go with that. Sorry. Okay, so with that, you don't have to solve all aspects of this challenge right off the bat, right? So part of the challenge is if you can create a system or a component of a system that is what we're looking for you to do. So if you can solve some aspect, one of the focus areas, or you can create like a component that would fit in with a larger system, but does that aspect of that system better, that is a perfectly plausible outcome. In terms of where you need to be by the end of this challenge, you don't have to have a working prototype. You just need to have a feasible concept. So if you can get to that point, then that's really what we're looking for. And what you're going to do by the end, if you're not local to the New York City area, is you would pitch to us with a 2-minute video and a 5-slide deck, and compete to get travel stipend to come to New York City for the in-person event. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to the whole purpose of what we had intended this for, which is solving the dense urban situational awareness question, and get some of the people who are actually experts on that to talk about it. So what I want to do is start having the mentors introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with Bob Hesse, who is the mastermind behind this. So hang on a second, let me unmute him and make him the spotlight for you all to see. All right, Bob, take it away. Introduce yourself.
Hey, thank you, Justin. I'm Bob Hesse. I'm with the U.S. Army Combat Capabilities Development Command. I sit duty station at the Armament Center in Picatinny Arsenal, and the technical lead for the Army's Subterranean and Dense Urban Community to Practice, which is a host of joint interagency and multinational operational technical folks trying to solve the unique problems for future dense urban operations. Over.
Great. Thanks, Bob. All right, Elijah, we're going to have you come in.
Hi, Captain Elijah Bales. I'm active duty Army officer in the 75th Ranger Regiment. Currently the innovation officer for 2nd Ranger Battalion, but past targeting experience on staff and most recently as an operational ground forces commander. So have less of the tech background, but I have a very deep understanding of the problems that users feel and can provide a ton of context on what we need to be helped with.
Great, thanks, Elijah. Matt, why don't you come in and introduce yourself?
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Sanisford. I also work at the Combat Capabilities Development Command's Armament Center, where Bob does, except I'm located at Fort Eustis, Virginia, in the TRADOC G2, which is the Intel side, and I've been on the Army Mad Scientist initiative for the past 4 years with them, and tangentially supporting Bob's mission with the dense urban sub-T stuff.
Great. All right, Stephen. Major Christopher. Hang on, you're muted. There you go. No, still muted.
Technical difficulties. I'm an infantry officer. That might speak to the technical difficulties. I specialize in ground combat operations. I have a background in the infantry community, and I currently work at the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab in the field testing branch, where we're taking new concepts and technologies and testing them on how they would incorporate into future Marine Corps operations.
Perfect. Cool. All right, Josh Houston, why don't you give us the 10-second intro?
Sure. Captain Josh Houston, work alongside Major Christopher, tank officer by trade, or what is known now as a free agent right now. So, but on the dense urban team, like I said, along with Major Christopher.
Awesome, thanks. All right, Brian Higgins, quick intro.
Hey guys, Brian Higgins. I'm a New York City detective assigned to the Emergency Service Unit. I'm currently on leave from that assignment, Lieutenant Colonel. I work for Asymmetric Warfare Group. I'm the Dense Urban Terrain Detachment officer in charge of that program in New York City.
Awesome, thanks. Josh Steele, quick.
Hey everyone, Josh Teal, currently a Special Forces Officer, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army, about 10 deployments to about 6 different countries, currently Commander of Special Operations Training Detachment and a doctoral student at Purdue University.
Awesome, thanks. All right, Heather Icord.
Sure, I'm a former Marine, former McKinsey, and I spent some time at Tank Battalion, so I'm laughing at Josh's comment here about free agency. But I'm currently working with the Defense Innovation Unit here in Boston.
Awesome. Thanks, Heather. All right, Tom LaPeruta.
Hey everybody, Tom LaPeruta. I am also with the Armament Center at Picatinny, New Jersey. I am the operations lead for artificial intelligence efforts. So basically building infrastructure, talent management, and recruitment and training.
Awesome. All right, Tim, you're up, buddy.
Hey everybody, my name is Sergeant First Class Tim Maybear. I am a Special Forces Communications Sergeant at the DSOD in Tisco 4th Battalion, 5th Special Forces Group Airborne. I actually did some work with Colonel Teal back in January at NTC rotation. My main responsibility is communications and special operations environments, and also I am helping to solve the future problems that we don't even know that we have yet right now. Thanks.
Awesome. Cool. All right, Clay, you're up, man.
Hey guys, my name is Clay Purrier. I spent about 10 years in the Army in the infantry, a little bit of time in the 75th Ranger Regiment. Currently out attending grad school at Georgetown, pursuing a degree in terrorism and substate violence, and working as an operations fellow with Colonel Pat Mahaney as we attempt to identify and solve the various challenges associated with the dense urban environment. So look forward to working with you guys.
Awesome, thanks, Clay. All right, Luke, you're last but not least.
All right, I am Luke Chavro, Deputy Director for the Army Mad Scientist Initiative under Army Futures Command, and I've been working with the dense urban folks for the last couple months now on this project.
Awesome, thanks, Luke. Okay, with that, I'm gonna switch us over to, let's take you off spot, right? We're gonna do a shared screen, look at the challenges, and we'll start answering some of these questions. So the first question I want to start us off with is, can you please give a few examples of real life situations to reflect the problems needing a solution, and given each situation presented, walk us through what tools would be used. Of the tools used, what is the top 2 or 3 things lacking in their capabilities? What sources of information are lacking? A key issue that I'm going to point out is there are things that we simply cannot talk about in this environment. And so there may be points where there's a question raised here and we're just simply not going to answer it because of the sensitivity of it. So we will do the best that we can to answer these questions and provide you as much information as possible to help you get going. But with that, I think I'd like to actually start off with Elijah to introduce and respond to this question.
All right, thanks, Justin. And like you said, there's a ton of different examples and information we can provide in this forum. I would say the biggest example of what we need help with is when there are combatants or a threat and non-combatants co-located, because in an environment where it's the German forces lined up against the US forces, it's pretty straightforward. You got lines going at each other. As you start to mix non-combatants into that environment, which is going to be very prevalent in a dense urban environment, it becomes very difficult to kind of do our job, because we are the good guys, and we are very, very, very strict in the way we apply the Geneva Convention and ensuring that we are limiting the loss of non-combatant life. So the biggest thing is just knowing where those non-combatants are in relation to threats. So a general example would be, just imagine clearing an entire floor. You've got 10 guys and you're told to clear an entire floor of an apartment complex. And you know there's 5 threats in that floor, and you know there's somewhere around 20 to 30 non-combatants, but you don't know exactly how many of those non-combatants are in there. And as you're walking down that floor, you're clearing from room to room, trying to identify and neutralize threats while protecting non-combatant life. And they may be in the same room, you don't know. You just know general numbers of who's on that floor, who's supposed to be on that floor.
Cool. Bob, would you like to chime in and talk about this at all?
Sure. Aside, hand it over to some of the other operational folks, but as far as just look at the question again, real life situation, there's Elijah was saying some hostage situations, search and rescue, rubblizing of buildings to go search in there, even with some first responders, fires or other type of policing. Also the ability to necessarily not clear room to room, but if you can have a standoff of sensing, meaning you'll hopefully get pointed to the rooms or floors of where combatants or non-combatants or civilians may reside, limits the stress and fatigue searching door to door. So it's really how do you see through multi-story buildings, subterranean spaces in order to move and communicate and sense what's in there to support your mission. Over.
Great. Does anybody else from the panel want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I'll just throw in one more thing, Josh Teal here. So one of the biggest challenges is simply knowing your operational environment more than just the enemy sometimes. So the interior layout of the building, if you're coming to an area that you're unfamiliar with, a building you haven't been in, which is high probability in a dense urban area, or you're ended up in a location you may not be, you're brought in from external. What is the layout of the building, which allows you to tactically address for both a safety standpoint for you, for potential civilians, and to deal with any threats, or whether that be the systems in the building or whether it be actual combatants. Layouts, design inside the building, always problematic.
Okay. Brian, you want to chime in?
Yeah, so I'll look at this from a little bit of a different perspective, just maybe from like a law enforcement tactical operation. If it's like an emergency situation, obviously we want to have all the information we can, like with the layout of the building and stuff like that, but sometimes it's just not possible. So, understanding, who's who in the zoo, for lack of a better term, it comes down to letting guys on the ground do their job and not burden them down with more requirements or more equipment, and just kind of having that. I think Bob had mentioned it, utilizing the tools that are available. Like, for example, I may or may not have had to clear the Waldorf Astoria looking for one guy that has like 900 rooms and takes the entire day. You want to get control of that fire room, or, utilizing the camera system so you can bypass things and stuff like that. Is that the same, maybe in an O'Connor situation, maybe not, but, utilizing that command and control, and letting the guys actually do the work is just kind of my 2 cents of that. Just kind of using the tools that we already have there is, just a thought, guys.
Hey, Justin, I've got something.
Let me find you here. Go ahead.
Yeah, guys. So to kind of get a little bit more specific on tools that we currently have and what those lacking capabilities are. So some of the N-class tools that we use within RSOF is ways that we can build situational awareness. So using something similar to ATAC, if you're familiar with that, and then using mesh networks to communicate with all of our operators on the ground. One of the biggest problems that you have when you're on the X is, how do I get information from that soldier sensor to a decision maker? Really easy example to think about. You and your team is inside of a small compound or building. One person's on a corner somewhere and he's taking fire. So he's engaging that enemy and he's trying to relay that information to the leadership and everybody else in the team, so that way we can change our posture. The question is, how does he do that? Well, right now, a lot of it's through voice communications. And for those of us on the call that have been shot at a couple of times, sometimes the information you give back isn't all that great. So some of the tools that we've done to increase that situational awareness, and like the other gentleman pointed out, of distinguishing friend from foe and from just simply, neutral parties such as civilians, is marking those on a map in a way that can be distroed to everybody in the organization. So I see there's a bad guy over in this building. I mark it on a map that gets sent out to everybody. So now even that commander that may be 3 or 4 rooms deep, he looks at his map, he knows exactly what I'm seeing and what I'm shooting at. Now, I'd like to add to that, this also creates a little bit of a lack of a capability, and that's data aggregation and decision making. It's really hard to make those decisions in a quick way without having all the information. But at the same time, when you have a flood of this situational information coming in, how do I determine what's important and what's not? So some of those capabilities that are lacking is the ability to aggregate that data, look through it in an intelligent way, maybe through some sort of machine learning or program already set up, and then feed it to the operator on the ground and the commander. So it's just like looking through log files after a computer's been hacked, right? You can go through all 10,000 lines, or you can use a smart program to go through it and say, hey, most of this is BS. This is what my guy needs to know. Now I'm only having to look at 3 or 4 or 5 updates and alerts versus 1,000 of them. So it allows that commander to make that better decision on the ground. And we currently lack that capability right now with all of our different sensors, a centralized way to aggregate those to help decision makers make better decisions with the most updated information in a clear and concise way.
Okay, so there's a key point I just want to kind of emphasize and maybe add some granularity to that you mentioned, and it's a great point. It's data aggregation, right? So I've got all the tools, but when we look at dense urban areas now and dense urban areas of the future, and I just walk down the street, I can see all these sensors that are out there. I can see cameras on a street light, a traffic light. I can see individual cell phones, right, which I know has a signal, and it also probably has a camera on it. I can look inside a building, and I know it's got an entry system for whatever, for a scanner, for metal detection, or it's got a camera just for its own security. So there's all these sensors that are in the dense urban area. How is a first responder coming into that area gain access to all those sensors quickly to improve his situational awareness, his or her situational awareness, to respond to the situation and really track everything? So that data aggregation, extremely frustrating that all those sensors are there. We just can't tap into them.
Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on a single question. Any last thoughts on it, or are you ready to move on to the next one?
Hey, Justin, this is Clay. I'll just point the participants to a couple of the resources we have set up on the website. You guys are asking for some real world situations. Recent examples in military and national security conflict history include the Battle of Mosul in 2017, the Battle of Marawi in 2018, and the Battle of Kunduz in 2015. A lot of material on our site, and then also kind of out there that you guys can kind of chew through, and you can see, very specific examples that have been very widely written about that may be useful to help frame your solutions. Over.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. What are some of the key operational requirements we should consider for a soldier or first responder to deploy a man-portable solution? Who wants to start with that one? Tim, I feel like this is a great question for you.
Yeah, brother, sorry about that. I was answering one of the questions on the little pop-up. All right, so speaking for a guy that's on the X, I've got what I can carry, whether I'm walking off of a bird, whether I'm jumping in, or whether I've had to ruck 15 kilometers to get there. So and then even thinking from the first responder, from doing some of the emergency stuff that I've done, whether that's a police officer, a fireman, or somebody like that. So man-portable, pretty much what that means is, we have these technological solutions. I mean, think about the first computer that took up a whole warehouse, right? And then now you've got it in the palm of your hand. So, but we've got a lot of equipment, like the Colonel was talking about, and a lot of these sensors that do all this really, really good stuff. But man-portable is, how do I make it small enough that I can carry it to get it to what we're calling the edge of that battlefield? So you guys have probably heard the term edge computing, which is about taking these huge server rack systems, and it's doing a lot of sensor aggregation and data. Well, the problem is those are specific and permanent style environments. And sometimes I may need that computing power way out there on the edge. And I'm talking so far on the edge where we don't have showers out there, or there's been an earthquake. There's no power for kilometers around. There's no water. So anything man-portable, what we're talking about here is it needs to be lightweight. It needs to be able to be carried around and not be cumbersome. And I'll get into why this is important in a minute. And we need to be sure that it gives us an advantage more than it takes away. Because everything I put on my body when I move out to an emergency situation, to an X, to anything like that, has to add more than it takes away. And it's going to take away space and weight capability. Because I can carry a 100-pound rucksack, but once we get into the 150-pound area, hey, it's a little heavy now. You know what I'm saying? So, and also I've got to have my protective equipment. I've got to have my weapons, my ammunition, all that stuff. So if you're going to add something to it, I've got to have a big bang for the buck. So that's what we're talking about being cumbersome. So it needs to be portable. Part of that portability and that lightweight small package is, is it battery powered? Is it ran off of a pack? Is it remote? I'm not really sure how you want to do that. But you've got to be sure that you've got it. It's going to add enough that I don't mind taking something off of my kit to put it in its place. Okay. So that's a really big consideration, because if you've got this cool thing that's a 30-pound backpack, all right, that's awesome. But I've pretty much just shut down one of my operators, and that's pretty much all that he's going to do. So to recap, portability, lightweight, think about how you're going to power, how long will it last? And also, how ruggedized is it? If I jump out of an airplane and drop it out of a bag, when I'm coming in at 100 feet AGL, is it going to break? If I lean up against a wall and do I smash it? Can it ride around in a bumpy truck without all of its parts all bouncing apart? So I think you need to think about those things: reliability, dependability, lightweight, power is a huge concern there. And does it give me something that I didn't have before, or does it make something I had before much, much more usable? And is it worth replacing another piece of gear on my kit that's going to keep me alive?
Yeah, that's great. And anybody else? I think that's a pretty complete answer, but anyone else want to add anything?
Justin,
on that?
can I add on?
Yeah.
I'd just like to add a pitfall that a lot of innovators make is they plan their equipment as if it wasn't already being worn with a bunch of other stuff. Is that they put their item in a backpack and they see how it fits on a body and they say, oh yeah, this is only 15 or 20 pounds. It is man portable. There's a great study out there. If you open source Google USMC combat load, or go to the Government Accountability Office Personal Protective Equipment study on what the Army soldier or U.S. Marine is already wearing in combat and the weight that adds up to. Your innovation, your man-portable item has to be integrated into what they're already carrying. So like was already mentioned, they don't have to make a decision to drop something else, or they can't work it with what they're already carrying on their body, or that it becomes too cumbersome in weight.
Good point, I think also relevant to current environment as well as future ones is some sort of ability to decon any sort of contaminant.
Brian, I think you said you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, so real quick, all those comments are spot on and awesome. I would just add to one thing. It's got to be somewhat waterproof. We're talking about subterranean environments, a lot of water. I mean, Hurricane Sandy, we basically carried nothing but hand tools, because all our radios, anything that we typically use on our load was pointless. Everything had to be decon. Everything was covered in Lord knows what I was swimming in. But we just used any bit of technology, cameras, just regular comms gear. It stayed in the truck because nothing was waterproof. I mean, you can only Ziploc bag so many things, But there's just in addition to all those things, those guys said, completely like you give a guy more stuff to carry, they're not going to carry it. It's going to be in a Pelican case.
Clay, I think Elijah, you said you had a comment.
Yeah, I would just add that. So imagine you've got 10 different companies developing 10 different sensors, and the guy can pick 2. So ultimately, the 2 that they're going to pick, as Colonel Thiel said earlier, is something that aggregates and integrates your data. Going forward, Tactical Assault Kit is our current base of what we use for kind of how we view our data on the ground. But I would say it has to integrate with TAC now, or has to have the ability to integrate with whatever future system. So keeping things open to integrate with the system is what's going to provide a product that can be useful to the operator, or we're just going to leave it at the house.
Okay. Great. I think that was a good response. I'm going to move on to the next question. So I feel like, Tim, you kind of responded to this a little bit. How much gear is it feasible to ask a unit to carry for this purpose? How much gear are they already carrying on average?
I'll let a good way to look at that, guys, is we call it the 60 rule. So as an example, my last trip when I was in Syria, with my protective equipment, my communications devices, ammunition, just what I put on, and to include my uniform, what I put on my body, what we're looking at right there is about a good 30 pounds. We've gotten a little bit lighter, but if we're going to do it the right way, you're looking at about 30. So what that means is I can throw a 100-pound rucksack on a guy, but now his only purpose is to move and defend himself. So you can add another 30 pounds of equipment in a small pack behind him, and he's still warfight capable. But we try to limit the total number that you have on a body at 60, because once you get past that, it's like a knight in huge armor, right? I can wear all this shit. I can wear ballistic plates on every part of my body, but I'll lose my ability to shoot, move, and communicate. So 60 is the high end. I would prefer to stay around 30, 35. That's something that we usually train with. You can move pretty effectively with that kind of amount on us. So I think that answers that question and answers the second question as well.
Yeah. Anybody else? Josh, did you want to chime in? Josh Houston?
Yeah, sure. So I'll jump in on that. I think that for the weight purpose, there's a lot of studies given by David Redpath. I don't know if anybody's heard of him, but they talk about having 45 pounds of everything when they tested it on out in theater, out in countries, tracking eye movement. Once they hit 45 pounds total weight on the body, their eyes, when they're patrolling, go straight down and straight forward, because it's just not, their body just can't really handle that and then act and move at the same time. So if you're talking 30 pounds, I think that there's got to be some type of delineation between what unit are you talking about and who specifically are you going to have with this type of capability. If it's somebody that is going to be specific, like a communicator, like the Sergeant First Class was saying, if that's his job and that's his equipment set, then that makes more sense maybe to put that specific backpack on that individual. But if you're talking about a regular, infantry guy being put on 30 extra pounds, that is not going to be sustainable, and he's not going to be able to fight. I would argue he's not going to be able to fight effectively, especially when you talk about urban environment. It's already chaotic. It's already very tiring as well. I mean, you go through one, a couple floors or a couple rooms, and you're already exhausted. So it depends on who the individual is, and then what type of specific technology are you talking about? Again, if it's specific to a communicator who's that's his primary job, then sure, maybe that makes more sense. But if you're talking about a squad, like an infantry squad being able to carry something, then you're talking about probably only about 5 pounds or less. Think about something that can already, like Major Christopher was talking about, fit on his kit. Can it fit inside a magazine pouch? Can it fit inside a grenade pouch? Can it fit, maybe integrated with a PEC, like a laser on a rifle, something to that effect that is going to help that individual out. So I would hesitate to say over 30 pounds unless it's a very specific individual, like some type of communicator or SIGINT type individual.
Yeah, if I could just piggyback on that's the key, is we can't give any single solution. It has to be this weight or it has to have these specs. It has to be the trade-off. There could be something that's so innovative and such a game changer that it makes that person that carries it valuable. An example, without being specific, is that when a electronic warfare jamming capability was created that could be carried around by a person that protect them from IEDs, that person, that became his sole responsibility, was to walk around carrying that, protecting everyone within his bubble for that effect that they wanted. And that made it his sole job. So if your innovation provides something so great that the trade-off is worth it, then don't worry about those, other little things. But it's about that trade-off.
Okay. I think that's pretty good. Let's go to the next question. Is a solution that must be trucked in or otherwise attached to a vehicle a viable solution? Who wants to start?
I can start with that one.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward. We always prefer to carry it. It allows more mobility. but if it has to be attached to a vehicle, that's just going to limit where it and how it can be used. But there are different types of vehicles, whether that's a ground platform or an air platform. Those are potential solutions as well. And as Major Christopher just said, if it is important enough, we will, and we want it bad enough, we will find something to put it on and figure out a way to bring it with us.
When I think of vehicle-mounted stuff, I think more to the first responder solution. These are innovations in organizations that bring a vehicle with them to every response. So if you innovate in that way, maybe the first responders can chime in to say, an ambulance, fire truck, police vehicles, what kind of things they bring in with every vehicle they arrive with, and how that affects them.
Justin, got some thoughts on that?
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I think too, when we talk about vehicular or some sort of motorized transportation, we're stuck with the kind of legacy implication of a Humvee or some sort of fighting vehicle. But keep in mind too that as we're moving forward across the various thresholds of innovation, mobility is innovating too. So things like all-terrain vehicles, of which four-wheelers everyone's familiar with, but also things on the far end, like the DARPA Mule, right, which is the four-legged robotic quadrupod, which probably has a mind of its own. Hasn't had the kinks all worked out yet, but that thing is, they're looking at platforms that can accompany ground fighting elements into the fight. And then that kind of brings the next point, which is the stuff you have on your person isn't necessarily the stuff you're going to be in a firefight with, right? So one of the principles that ground forces employ is they move to a last cover and conceal position or an objective rally point where they'll drop off that equipment under security and under supervision so that the fighting element can then can refit, conduct further planning, deploy whatever equipment they need. But if there's things like sustainment or things like shelter that they're not going to need in the firefight, they're going to leave that back at a secure location. And then I just echo Major Christopher's comment that things like a handheld drone or an unmanned ground vehicle for sensing, that's not going to be ubiquitous throughout an organization. Everyone's not going to have one of those. So again, it goes back to some of these capabilities will be specialized, and so there'll be an individual committed to that. Finally, just a comment kind of back to operational conditions or operational considerations for your technology. I don't know if I may have missed it. I don't think we touched on the signal of vulnerability of your technology. So thinking about that we may be competing in an environment that has a contested or very dense spectrum, that has a spectrum that is being observed or a spectrum that's being spoofed. So again, making sure that you're paying attention to the data transport means your technology is using to push data from one place to another. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Clay. Anyone else before we move on to the next question?
Just to hop onto that, similar to what was said about, not everybody's probably going to have a personal handheld drone, but something that we do have to consider in terms of vertical structures as well for dense urban is that if you're looking at a heavier kind of UAV or aerial vehicle, then you might be able to mount potentially something on there depending on the swap C constraints, and think about being able to see inside of those structures, because as it was said too, you're not exactly bringing that to fight per se, but based on the comm structure, you might be able to project out what is happening inside those structures.
Okay. Ernie, did you have something that you wanted to chime in with? You can actually speak.
Yeah, I was just want to say that if you look at the fact that you should try to look at it a modular development concept so that it's easy to take apart and put together. You can distribute the weight among the squad, but it's harder to have a lot of weight. One person carry.
Okay. Cool. Let's move on. Question number 5: what kind of on-station time is needed for an unmanned type system? I think Stephen, you had said you wanted to chime in on that one.
Yeah, I think anybody that works with the experimental kind of UAVs or drones knows that it's a major pitfall of battery life, that it is just not a valuable asset if it can only fly around for 15 minutes and then you got to bring it back down. You may not see what you need to see then, or you may see something that, requires a follow-on action. So we really need to stretch our ability for on-station time with our drone technology. So if you're looking at like a gold standard, I can't say what it is. Everyone has a different requirement, but if you're under an hour, you're probably not meeting anybody's benchmark. If you can only provide an hour's worth of or less standby time.
To piggyback on what the Colonel said, one of my duties is as a JTAC instructor for my guys. And a big thing that we teach them is, like he had mentioned, anytime you have these assets that give you the eye in the sky, you're always worried about time, because every minute he's up there, you're burning fuel is kind of the way to go. So whether I've got 15 minutes or an hour, or if I'm lucky and got a Gray Eagle for 8 hours or something like that, being able to have that warfighter know what to do with that, that's his job. So one of the ways that we can help with this, and I've done some experimental stuff with small UAVs, just like the Colonel has, is you're right, you get something, okay, I can fly it for 9 minutes. Okay, that's great, but it's small, it's portable, that's awesome. But I can't continually build my situational environment. So something I want you to think about, guys, is it's it's mission dependent on how long we need it up there. Maybe I need to look at just some guys behind a wall for 1 minute to be able to get a mortar on them, or maybe I need to set up a observation position that's going to be there for 24 hours. So, and the cool thing with today's technology to kind of hopefully get some of your minds going on is think about exchange systems. So currently what we do is, like with aircraft, is yo-yo, right? I've got a jet on station, 2 jets, they got to refuel, but I want to keep them with her for 4 hours. So what I do is I leave one on station, the other one refuels and comes back, and they swap up for the entire vol. Think about doing this with drones. Think about doing this with unmanned systems. So maybe instead of just giving me one little helicopter that I can fit in my pocket like the British use, like the Colonel said, that lasts 15 minutes, you give me 4 of them. And each one has a charging cycle that's less than the flight time. So now what I have is I have a box that I sit down on the ground, I launch one of them, it's up there in the air, and then it knows that, hey, I need to launch another one because that one's about to die. So one comes up, they come into it, the video feed moves over to the other one and then comes back down and charges. So in essence, as long as that battery charging unit has as much power as I can put into it, or continuous power, now you've just given me an eye in the sky that can stay up forever based upon, as long as the system doesn't break down. And then taking that a step further is, or maybe I have a series of 10 of those or 15, or think about a drone swarm. I don't need to put 30 of them up in the air. I just need to have like 5 up at a time. That way I can continually rotate them out. So I always have an eye in the sky. And then instead of me looking through one eyeball, I have a data aggregation system that brings that to a central thing. So as they switch out, to me as the operator on the ground, it's seamless. Because maybe they're not just giving me video feed, maybe they're identifying targets through facial recognition or smart technology. So really what I'm looking at is a 3-dimensional map, or a map with all these dots showing me everybody that's walking around. And then if I'm like, who is that guy? I can click on it. It shows me the camera. Okay, I see him. Then I can mark him as good or bad or neutral. So kind of think about that, that kind of thing when answering that question, how long does it need to be up? Because it's going to be depending on the mission.
Great.
It is Bob. Just to add on the conversation, I would also consider kind of, ways and means for power generation. We're mentioning outside airspace, but one of the real big challenges is traversing inside ingress egress points, staircases, thresholds, air dynamics or flight dynamics and movement. So we've seen a lot of these in some of the prior experiments. They just only, they only go in probably about 20 minutes worth. You're lucky if you get a floor. So self-navigation and behaviors of anything with autonomy or AI on how to figure out how to map, how to move, but also, that energy harvesting or energy generation from the environment or other kind of marsupial-like unmanned systems are something folks should be considering over.
Matt, you wanted to chime in on this?
Yeah, just to go back to what Tim said, and I think Major Christopher was talking about, when we talk about these hackathons and these online challenges, we're not going to get a solution that solves everything, every aspect of this problem in one piece of technology. So going back to what Tim was talking about, where we have a UAV that could fly for 9 minutes, well, that doesn't tell us much. But if you guys come up with a solution, it gives us, you know, a sensor that can tell us there's people in this building on this specific floor. Well, then maybe we can use that UAV that can only fly for 9 minutes to give us an actual picture of what's in there, but it's narrowed us down to this specific building and this segment of the city and this floor and this room inside of it. So we can integrate those two things, where if we didn't have that sensor before from this hackathon, we'd say, well, we don't need this UAV. But bringing them together, there's actually a solution there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Rather than focus on the duration of the system, focus on the capability that you're bringing to the situation, and what you're revealing about the environment to build situational awareness, right? So when I think about maybe a drone that's going to go up and kind of 3D map the city in front of me, the path that I'm going down, that may happen in 10 minutes, right? Then it returns to base. It's mapped it, popped it down to your cell phone, and I'm off and moving, right? All the entrance points in the buildings, I can see that, right? Didn't take very long. Another aspect is just the signal environment, right? The UAV flies around, it picks up all the signals, and then it just lands at the optimal location where it can track all the signals, right? Once again, it's identified them, it's tracking them. Doesn't have to be in the air. Maybe it's still functioning. Maybe solar panel on top, because those are both outside. Maybe nighttime, that doesn't help you. But so focus on solving the situational awareness problem with the capability. And then I think the endurance of the system will be revealed after that. The other thing is, we've talked a lot about systems, like the last question was about trucks, for example, but think about the mesh and the reach back. All right. So if you've got a mesh system harvesting every little signal environment to send your information back to base, it's getting communicated, they're aggregating it into something useful for you or more situational awareness. You may not have to take it with you in the modern day computing environment. All of our apps reach back to something else that gives us higher end computing beyond that of our phones, as an example. So just some minor points.
Great. Any other last comments on this?
Just on to what the Colonel was saying, something I want you guys to think about, everybody that's entering this thing, is I know 5G is being thrown around a lot, and it's the new sexiness. And the government, of course, is looking for solutions to kind of to bring that 5G into our domain. So like Colonel Till was talking about with edge computing earlier, and like he had just mentioned about getting that information to me really, really quickly from that 5-minute drone flight or whatever that it needs. 5G, because of the pipe that's so big, it requires edge computing right there at that battlefield level. So if you can find a way to do that in a small package, now, like he had mentioned, you've got that 3D map. Well, now that Colonel Teal's got it, that's great. But how do I get that information all the way across the other side of that village as I'm trying to, do a simultaneous breach with him on this X? So leveraging something like 5G or 4G mesh or something like that would definitely be able to take that huge amount of data that he just got processed and then blast it out to everybody. And then again, that does what? The main focus of this is to build situational awareness. So something what you guys think about.
Perfect. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Oh, look at that. I skipped number 6. It's unlucky. Are end users typically more starved for defensive intel or offensive intel? In other words, are defensive situational awareness capabilities less powerful relatively than offensive situational awareness capabilities? Who wants to go first?
I'll give it a try, Justin. What I think of when I read this question is about a stationary position or something that is immobile or responsive in another location. Most of our assets that are stationary or that are in a defensive posture have the ability or have the benefits that come with that. So a fixed power source tied right into other communications, the command and control centers. I mean, think about like either a police headquarters or a military base. They're going to have a lot of benefits that come with it. And those are typically large and well provided for. But it's the mobile units that have to go respond. The units that are kind of alone and unafraid are on their own. They're the areas where I think we need the most innovation. That is the place where people are on the front lines are being challenged the most with the capabilities that they have and what they brought with them.
I would just add that offensive capabilities are going to be harder to solve, and that's where you should be spending your time. As Midge Christopher said, like if it's an offensive capability that we want to use in a defensive capacity, we just plug it into the wall or some type of infrastructure that's already there.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, I would add just quick offensive and defensive when you're talking in the urban. I personally, I wouldn't get, so I might challenge a couple people, but I wouldn't get too wrapped around the axle of offensive and defensive in an urban setting, at least for operators' standpoint, because your offense and defensive is going to flow, is going to transition very quick. Think about, the most popular sport in America is football, right? You have offensive and defensive, and that's the way we like to think. But really, it's like a game of soccer or hockey. You're constantly transitioning between offense and defense styles, trading space for time, and everything else. So don't get wrapped around whatever. I would say stick to the challenge, which is sensing. Most of the infantry that we've lost in recent, in the recent history has been due to just trying to find the enemy. Soldiers and Marines close with and destroy very well, but there's a part before that, and that's finding the enemy. And that's actually where we take the majority of our casualties. So I wouldn't get too wrapped around the axle on this one, because that transition is going to be very ebb and flow. At the tactical level is mainly where I'm kind of speaking from.
Okay. All right, let's move on. I think that's a good answer on this. Okay, what is actionable? Is there a time frame associated with it in seconds?
I'll tackle this one to start.
Okay.
So actionable, let's define. If we're talking about information gathered from sensors and situational awareness, actionable is, can I take this information that I have and can I do something with it that is worth my time versus doing my time to do something else? Okay. So, and time frame in seconds, I think this is a terrible way to think about it. Again, I know we keep throwing out, mission essential stuff, what the mission is going to dictate. Okay. So it's really going to depend on if I'm dropping a bomb or if I'm trying to do a sniper shot, or if I'm just simply trying to build situational awareness about how the civilians are going to act as soon as we go into, how do I word that correctly? Detain or capture somebody. Okay. So actionable is going to be based around the sensing information that I get. Is it reliable in a timely manner that allows me to make a decision that I need to make now? So kind of think of the OODA loop. Does that information put me in the right position in the OODA loop, or does it take me out of it? And that kind of goes back earlier to what I was talking about how data aggregation and being able to look through all that sensor data and get what I need now versus, oh, well, it's good to see that, but I needed that yesterday.
Bob, I'll add on that, and looking at it in a different or just another way, what complements that is, sensing assets being able to push actionable information and not raw data, huge files that have yet to get processed at a common operating picture or an ATAC-like device. So actionable can also be considered, that tactical processing at the edge, right? So these microprocessors of sensors, creating a map, don't necessarily need to push huge amounts of data files forward. Process, give me the map at some, reasonable resolution that could be user set, let's say. So actionable on both levels, from the user going through it at the front end to the sensing at the tactical edge.
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, so actionable, I think it's tough to get the situational awareness to savvy in seconds. But to make your plan and to know what's in front of you, I think you've got some minutes. And I go back to a basic example. When I was a kid, I used to roll around with my grandfather in his fire truck. He was a police chief in town, and he just rolled around all day, volunteer department, waiting for a fire to happen. And in the back of that truck, he had a file cabinet with the blueprints of every single building in town. And he would show up at the fire first, usually. He'd go back, take a minute, pull out the blueprint, look at the blueprint, know where the probable bedrooms are, family members were probably, go in, pull out all the people, rest of the department shows up, puts out the fire, right? So that minute or two to build a plan puts you in a better position. That's back to that OODA loop he's talked about, which is observe, orient, decide, and action.
I think that's great. Okay, let's move on to the next question. For first responders, what are the top three things most important to know about an interior space? I feel like Pat, are you on? You're muted. Let's see here. Try now. Nah, you're still muted. I can't hear you. Damn. All right. Anybody else want to try to talk on the first responder thing? Not quite sure we have the right group for that one. Maybe Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I'll hit it real quick. I mean, I think it's the same thing that you'd want to know in any operation. I mean, what are your threats? Whether it be human or unhuman. I mean, I want to know if I'm going to a house that's got 9 pit bulls in it. Information I'd like to know before I go in. Maybe the infrastructure of the location. The best you can know that. And I mean, obviously everything depends. Everything is based on time. That's the big variable, right? I mean, is it an emergency situation or is it a planned operation? But talk through this. I say threats. I would say the physical structure of the building, meaning like, is the floor going to fall out? Is it, what I mean? Or is it a well-constructed building that has, steel and rebar? Because that's going to mess up your communications. If you're on the 80th floor of a building that's made of steel, rebar, and, pressurized glass, you're not going to be able to talk to the ground. And then the third thing would be, where's the coffee, I guess. I don't know, I can't think of it much more, so.
Okay. Pat, you up now? Pat, can we hear you? I sort of hear you, Pat, but I don't know if you hear us. Okay.
I'll give you
Go ahead, Josh.
I'll give you a slightly tangential real scenario that just goes through my head that I think could represent for your assault or military type, but also for first responder, right? So when I was aide de camp for General Brooks, he's a 4-star, had to move him all around the Pacific, got a security detail. The first thing I would do when I go to a hotel, right, I want to know where all the entrances and exits are, where I can get in, where I can get out, where somebody else can get in, get out, quick escape if the building's collapsing or on fire, right? Or whether I want to plan 2 assaults in 2 different directions at a time, right? Next thing I always want to know is where's the stairwells, right? So where are those points, how I move up and down and move throughout the building, and then main corridor hallways, right? And then lastly, the thing I'd always want to know is he's high profile enough that I'd usually call down at the front desk or I'd send someone down like our commo guy before we moved in the morning. And I want to know if the media is outside waiting for him or if someone's in the lobby that just wants to ambush him or ask him a question or get an autograph that we're trying to dodge because we're on a timeline, right? So when I think about that, I think, hey, what do the signals environment look like? Are there Wi-Fi cameras all over this place that I could tap into? So kind of back to entrances, exits, vertical movement spaces, horizontal movement spaces, those big corridors that you really need to move to get around, and then anything in that building that I can slave to gain more situational awareness. There's security room with all the cameras, Wi-Fi cameras, anything like that that I can slave.
Okay, great. Pat sent me a comment talking about hazmat issues, people, exact location orientation. So for 6-sided approach, 4 sides, top, bottom, what's the Z-axis information we can gather. And then structural integrity, like Brian said, floor collapse. And the other question was like, do windows open? How do we, what are all the methods for gaining access to the structure? Okay, let's move on to the next one. How do military and civil defense authorities digitally share information today? How difficult is it to get all authorities to sign information sharing agreements? And will authorities typically install software at the request of the DoD if fully paid for? I don't know how to begin to answer that question.
Nice try, Russian spy.
They don't. I think the answer is they don't really at this point. That's not necessarily true. It's going to be an EOS, an emergency operations center. It's going to be, liaison officers and just general, kind of archaic ways like that. That's just based on my understanding. in New York City alone, I think there's 20, something like 22 different law enforcement agencies, not including the one that has 38,000. Like, I mean, we're not on the same frequencies. I mean, like we set up, like, you know, if I'm going to do a joint operation with like the state police or something, literally, I give them one of my radios and I take the state police radio. I mean, it's not so that's definitely, I think, a solution that could be tapped in. As far as the National Guard coming in play for disc operations, you know, there definitely is a lot of permissions and authorities that are involved there as far as like what the green suitor can use, you know, in, you know, the continental United States as far as communications and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of our stuff on the military side is obviously a lot stronger, you know, as frequencies and stuff. I mean, you can't disrupt the operating environment. I mean, there's lots of stuff we can use, you know, in a foreign land, because we don't really care if we knock down the cell phone tower or we take over the radio station. But like, you know, do that in Midtown Manhattan, you're gonna have more problems than a math book. So I think that's definitely something, especially now with this COVID thing. I mean, I think that would be, we're really using liaison officers to be very blunt. And that's really how, I mean, I don't think they have a cop. I know there's been some discussion with a couple of guys that are on this of creating a common operating picture that would work out, but you know, a lot of it just comes to the integration piece of it. You know, you got, you know, these guys use Windows, these guys use whatever. So, you know, so just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that's great. Okay, I say we move on. If you're online, whoever asked this question, feel free to post it in Teams, and we'll try to dig into it more with additional mentors. Okay, question 11, how are you linking the results of this program with similar stated requirements, such as Censor the Wall, which is 2 other U.S. military requests for proposals? Bob, as the mastermind of all the dense urban situational awareness stuff for the Army, do you have a thought on that would be useful for people to think about, or what do you think?
Sure. I mean, other than potential opportunities of the program after this, with you know, other kind of small business research efforts or other type of seeding. One of the things of interest is anything that comes out of here that's tangible to basically experiment or demo with in one of our series that we're doing in New York, you know, throughout 2021 and beyond. So there's at least an interest in that, and how these things may fit or spiral into potential programs that exist or technology projects that exist. So there are opportunity potentials. Over.
Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next one. What non-invasive security technologies are needed to reduce violent crimes or terrorism? Who wants to start there?
Can I say something?
Sure, go ahead, Ernie.
So, what non-invasive security technologies are needed to reduce violent crimes or terrorism? I think that's we'd like to hear those ideas of how participants think that that question can be addressed. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer, and really kind of brings us back to the purpose of the challenge, right? Is we don't want to define for you what the solution should be. What we want you to do is come to us with new ideas based on the feedback we're providing to you from the questions that you ask on sort of the needs, I guess, of the end user. Like, what is the end user trying to do, and then determine what kind of technologies could be used in to solve that problem.
I think something on there real quick is the only difference between prevention and response is the timing. So there was a really good book written by a Marine Corps officer called Left of Bang. And just to sum up the entire book, the idea was, how do you take that warfighter and allow him to react before bang, like before the terrorist jumps out of somewhere and shoots him, or before that beam the fireman is going underneath the building falls on him. And I think how you do that is you aggregate sensor data in a way and present it to somebody in a timely manner to allow them to then prevent a crime a terrorist act, a disaster from happening before it does.
Okay, I
Hey,
think
Justin, I can follow up on Tim's comment there also.
yeah.
So a couple things to Tim's point. Obviously, prevention is the preferred method, right? Because you don't then have to put operators in harm's way, first responders in harm's way, and incur the event happening before and accruing casualties or damage before you address the threat. But obviously, especially domestically, right? Just to give you guys some conceptual things to chew on. Domestic law enforcement is obviously heavily restricted by what it can do predictively, right? So predictive policing kind of starts sounding like Minority Report, right? Being able to arrest or serve warrants based on intent. And that's obviously that starts to violate a lot of the constitutional norms in the state. So back to Tim's point, just as you guys develop these solutions, take a look at the New York City domain awareness system. There's a lot of open source information out there on that. Probably the most advanced form of what used to be an investigative tool and is now starting to be a prevention tool. And to Tim's point, it doesn't do so much the system, and again, it's a more of a common operating picture, and to Colonel Field's point, does a lot of aggregation of various types of sensors throughout Manhattan and the greater New York area. And Brian can speak to this probably a lot more articulately than I can. But for the preventative purposes, what it's doing is it's not identifying someone who is a threat and then going to arrest them in anticipation of an act. But what it's doing is it's helping the New York City law enforcement ecosystem better align its resources to locations that may have a higher probability of follow-on incidents, right? So if that makes sense, there's an event that occurs, there's 5 Ws that are pushed into a system, the 5 Ws are received, processed, and then those 5 Ws, the who, what, when, where, why, help the law enforcement organizations then get an idea of, hey, where do I need to deploy additional sensors? Where do I need to deploy additional law enforcement to look for a follow-on act? So again, balancing that security and privacy is important. The other point that's kind of worth noting here to your question on terrorism is obviously terrorism has kind of very much, it's very much evolved in how the perpetrators are carrying out their acts, right? And what we used to call expeditionary or sensational terrorism was terrorism that was really highly orchestrated, right? You have something like the Paris 2015 attacks, or the 7/11 attacks in London, or obviously our 9/11 attacks, were very well orchestrated. And the advantage that the law enforcement or the defender has in that case is there's a lot of traffic going on between the terrorist and his support and auxiliary networks, people that are providing him the tools or the intelligence that he needs. The Islamic State has kind of created an interesting paradigm shift in that environment, especially in the intelligence environment, because you have a lot of these lone wolves that are starting to act. And the difference obviously being that a lone wolf doesn't need to coordinate with anyone. He doesn't need to talk to anyone about his action. But what he also is lacking is someone to kind of glorify his cause, right? So he's got to be his own hype man, as it were, online, especially on a lot of these darker forums, 4chan, Discord, a lot of these underground forums of the events that are going on. So to your question, there is I think a whole space to be explored for algorithms and tools that can look across various reporting platforms and start to develop indicators, warnings and indicators that an attack is about to go down. Data miner is a good example, but I think there's a whole lot room there to kind of explore further. And again, not to preemptively arrest people, but to inform authorities as to how best they can position resources to respond or interdict that threat when it decides to act.
All right, thanks, Clay. All right, let's move on to the next question. My cat has decided to participate in the AMA. Okay, question 13. From the ideas I've seen, several ideas are far off from the prompt, which was getting information of an interior space and relaying it back to first responders. I was wondering, is the prompt flexible and most defense detection methods are valid, or do we have to stick on the interior spaces? Will there be a future challenge event focused on outdoor environments? So maybe for that last part of that question, but in general, it's kind of flexible, but I'm going to turn to Bob because he's sort of the mastermind behind the focus area here. So Bob, what are your thoughts on this question?
So the challenge at hand obviously is, interior spaces, right? Using those and the complexities within the vertical dimensions, you know, underground. Outdoors is obviously part of that, you know, prior to entry, looking at ingress, egress points, landing zones, pickup zones, external other things. But I think, you know, the big challenge here, in my opinion, is getting into the interior space and getting situational understanding of interior spaces that have denied degraded comms, data links, and all the other challenges that are associated with that. Over.
Okay. I think that's a good answer. Let's just move on to the next one. Okay, question 14. We're planning to use low frequency radio waves in order to detect soft hard bodies through obstructed sites and through enclosed areas. Any thoughts on that?
That's Bob. Yeah, okay. It'll be interesting to what they come out with as a, you know, a capability on this one. So I don't know, you know, other than, I don't know what else to add to that, to that question.
I guess we'd need to know more about it to determine if it's a feasible concept. So suggest that whoever asked this question, if you're online, submit your idea on the DIN, and let's start a conversation about the capability and discuss feasibility.
So, real quick,
sorry.
So real quick, it's not just, you know, I would, the only other thing I would say here is, again, it's not just the detecting, monitoring, it's how you get that information out, how you process that, and how you display that to the user for actionable information.
I think something to add to that real quick is think about what other equipment you're using. I know in a lab environment, we like to design super cool, swanky stuff, and we pretend that it's the only item the operator is going to be using. But especially when it comes to spectrum, okay, what other radios am I using? So as an operator, whether I'm a first responder that's using you know, a standard ICOM network with that may actually be frequency hopping to prevent any sort of downtime or jamming, or maybe I'm using just a single channel ciphertext as an operator, plus I've got SATCOM, plus I'm talking to aircraft, or you know, maybe I'm having to use shortwave radios to do that underground facility. So I like the idea. You know, I kind of was thinking like almost like a sonar idea earlier, but using radio waves at low frequency may have merits. But we also need to think about, does it have to be low frequency? I mean, by the nature of how the EM spectrum works, low would be better. But is that device, I can see past a wall, that's great. But if it also interferes with the radios I'm currently using to talk to my buddies to come get me out, if I'm trapped or shot, then it doesn't really do me a whole lot of good.
Yeah, depending on where you are on the spectrum is going to determine your range, your propagation length, what you can penetrate through, what you can detect. So it is a piece of the situational understanding.
Great. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Question 15, are we solely focused on what's in the S&T pipeline? Is there an option for an alternate future, such as no physical, I think that's command post is what they're saying, but rather its users have I don't know what BMI is, BMI interconnect via skull cap and a wireless connection to an optical radio that links to an airborne drone that is in turn connected to a blackjack SATCOM. All also be an XR, so AR or VR, setup and teardown cease to be considered. Matt, I think you had an answer to this question, at least the first part of this question.
Yeah, no, and I'm not sure where that assumption comes from. I don't think any of us thought we were focused just on what's in the S&T pipeline. In fact, we're looking for things that are outside of that we don't know about. I won't say anything else about the other part other than sure there's an option for it. You know, build out the idea and let us know, and we'll take a look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move on to the next. This is really long. How important is the greater context of the urban fabric as it relates to the objective, building, room and building, etc.? Novel techniques for seeing inside the building are one of the goals of this event, but what are your thoughts on integrating that into a greater visualization of the urban environment, such as line of sight placement, mounted and dismounted ingress, egress to and from the objective area, subterranean understanding, subways and utility tunnels, etc.? This is oriented on the display information portion of the event. Thoughts on this?
It's Bob. I think that's exactly what we're trying to get and kind of push the envelope on. You know, it'll grow into the greater urban fabric, but that's going to depend on either, you know, how the assets spread, how the coverage spreads. But I think in essence, that's this is part of the challenge.
Sure.
Yeah, I would just say from our perspective, like we can't do it within a single story structure, so we're struggling to do that now. If you can do it for an entire city, that's awesome. We're just focusing on doing it at a small scale first.
Right. Ernie, I think you had your hand up first. Ernie.
My mistake.
No, you don't have a comment? Okay. Josh, Houston?
Yeah, just like Bob Hesse said, but I think for the again, I view a technology in an urban environment as a tiered system. Different levels of you know, the operation are going to want to know different things. As far as higher battalion commander has, you know, obviously a deeper picture than that. But I think any technology that moves forward as that scope starts to open up, inside that capability needs to be a kind of a layered system. So I can peel back the onions or the layer of the onions, depending on which level I'm at, because there is a great concern for saturation of information, especially the lower level you go. So I think as far as like the context of urban fabric, obviously the more the better as far as like a larger system goes, if it gets to that point, but there has to be some off ramps built in there as far as different, you know, commanders at different levels can look at the information that's pertinent to them, and not just all kind of muddled in together.
Great. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Are we looking more towards modifying existing equipment or developing something completely new? Both. Let's do both of these things. So if there are existing capabilities that we can adapt to responding to this problem, you know, make those capabilities better, that's great. That's innovation. If you can develop something completely new, that's great. That's innovation. Both of these are viable pathways. So I think that the question is easily answered. So let's move on to the next one. What are the main information gaps first responders face as they arrive on the scene in an emergency response scenario like a building fire or collapse? What sources of information are lacking? I feel like we kind of started to answer this question already. Brian, do you want to chime in maybe just on that first part of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple guys that are more fire centric on here, but it's just for general class. I mean, you know, everything comes back to time. I mean, a couple guys have said on the threads. I mean, in New York City, we kind of have a lot of that stuff, like, you know, all the information through that domain awareness system, or it's going to get pushed through your phone, through the queue in your truck. You're going to get as much information as you can, but a lot of it comes out of time. I mean, you know, if you get there and you need to get in there and grab some people, you know, you're probably not even going to look at that because there's not going to be time to do that. I guess one thing I would say, just based on some real things that have happened, you know, unfortunately, it's sometimes slowing the job down a little bit and start looking at the things you might not be thinking about. You know, gas lines. I mean, we've had we've lost a bunch of guys from gas explosions because we're focused on the, you know, the collapse of the fire, and maybe we didn't really understand why it happened, or, you know, sometimes it's not exactly what it is. And, you know, you start moving into those places, and, you know, you do a tactical job in a grow house or a lab or something, and, you know, it's a whole different dynamic. I mean, I don't know if that answers the question. What's the main gap? I mean,
yeah, I mean, Pat threw out some comments, you know, exact nature of the hazards, like the gas lines, like you just mentioned, structural integrity, building layout. The inside is often different than what the plans actually say. And
always the most obvious thing, you know, it's what you don't see that's going to hurt you. You know, that's
Yeah.
kind of how I look at it. So
yeah. Okay, cool. Let's move on from there. Oh, here it is. It's the same question twice. Continuing on. what sort of technology is currently used to communicate in emergency response scenarios? Is it primarily radio? Anyone got a comment on that one?
Yes, it's primarily radio until the radio stopped working.
Okay, until the radio stops working.
Yeah, you know.
What about? I mean, yeah. Are there any digital connections beyond? I mean, like, I guess it depends on how you define radio in this question.
I can jump in there for compliment there, Justin.
Yeah,
Brian. I think Brian's already mentioned it, but I think again, like all tactical formations, there's kind of a tiered set of technologies, right? So there is the VHF handheld radio at the basic user level, and one of the things that again, dense urban environments that are developed and established have to their benefit is they have a variety of repeaters, a variety of robust antennas, redundancy across not only, of course, your VHF radio, but then also having a Wi-Fi or a cellular backbone. You can also push data across, and that's again the benefit of a established first world environment that especially an expeditionary military force can tie into and leverage. The next tier, of course, after the VHF radio would be something along the lines of the domain awareness system. Again, the equivalent to that kind of in the military is the ATAC, the Android Tactical Application Kit that Elijah kind of mentioned there earlier. And then again, that system principally in the dense urban environment would run off of pre-established Wi-Fi or towers, cell phone towers. In the military, it'd be slightly more expeditionary, and you'd have to build some of those networks out. Again, the mesh that's already been mentioned, the TACSAT that's kind of already been mentioned. So there's a variety of systems there. And again, I think one of the key points I want to convey is whatever system that you're building, having the capacity to kind of even link in with partner force systems. Let's say you're going into a Karachi or you're going into a Mumbai or Mexico City to give humanitarian assistance and relief. Having the ability to tie into some of those existing communication structures while mitigating some of the operational security risks is a big thing to consider also.
Hey, Bob, real quick. So, for example, working with some of the first responders in New York, getting back. So yeah, primarily, RF radios, but they don't want to carry multiple nodes, right? We've kind of done some stuff with some repeaters, and everything you add to them as they carry hoses and gear, just like military, they don't want things that they got to store and then drop. Currently, they're using their radios and they're using a human to kind of do the act as the node radio piece. So, just want folks to consider that if they're looking at other novel ways for the comms line.
I think a cool way to piggyback on what Mr. Hess said there is think about, we do a lot with virtual machines nowadays, participants, and think about the way that you can do that with communications gear. Because as an example, like take software-defined radios. I do a lot of work with those. So maybe I do have a single radio that has a physical radio built into it for one specific RM band. But if I can design that with 2 or 3 chipsets in it, okay, so maybe it has a 4G, 3G local cell phone network if it's up. Maybe its next redundancy is going to be, let's say, on the VHF spectrum. And then the next one is something that's maybe low frequency. So now I've got a single device, a single piece of hardware that because we have enough physical radio hardware pieces in it, maybe 2 to 4, and a nice, easy to use software piece on top of that. Now what we can do is I can take my one radio and I can communicate with, the detective in the NYPD because I know his frequency band. I can communicate with my buddy up at the ops center via cell phone traffic, and I can communicate with my other team guys behind me in the fire department because maybe they're using a different frequency band. But having a single device that I could simply like, hey man, just give me your radio information. I can plug it in here. And now that single radio, instead of just being a one-trick pony, could do 3 or 4 tricks at a time. And we really haven't done a good job of looking into that with software-defined radios or being able to micro that technology. But I think to kind of go with what Bob's saying there, instead of me having to carry 3 radios around, just give me a smart box. I can only carry 1.
Okay.
So let me one more example here, and this maybe fits. I haven't brought it up yet, but I had the luxury of being the G3 at Gisoto P in the Philippines when Typhoon Yolanda hit and ripped through central Philippines. And just to set it up for your kind of awareness, imagine typhoon or hurricane, 275-mile-an-hour winds, 4 hours, and then tsunamis that came after that and wiped out 10,000 people in a town, things like that, right? No cell phones working, no power working. So we took a few helicopters and we dropped 4 people in, 4 operators in at 4 of the rural airfields where a town was located. When they got on the ground, they found police with radios that could work, no communications back to central government, provincial government. They found army units that had radios that could work, but no contact with the police, no contact with central government. And then as you started to open up the airfield, you had NGOs rolling in. Each of them had their own comm system, had their own satellite communications if they were a bigger NGO. We definitely couldn't communicate out because we had SIPR or secret level satellite communication, so I couldn't get the information out to NGOs to coordinate. So I got tarps showing up where I need food, and at the other place I got food showing up where I need tarps because all the houses are gone. So that lack of communication, but people having localized radios is a common thing. I think you're going to see when everything's knocked out during some sort of crisis, whether that's man-made, whether it's nature-made, and a lot of these areas that you may go to that are dense urban areas, but in a slum area where there isn't a lot of electricity, where cell phone towers don't set up because they don't make as much money, so your communication is limited in those areas. So that just kind of paints a picture of a scenario where you got everybody with radios, no one can talk, third world country, cell towers knocked out for maybe a week in this case, and potentially no power for about 4 or 5 days. You could see a modern day version if you just look at the tsunami in Japan and the nuclear meltdown there.
That's great. Ernie, were you trying to come in on this?
Yeah, I was saying that you like when you go to a different country, if you take a small television and you try to see the television in another country, the systems might not be compatible. But if you look at a computer, your computer basically connects to in any country. It just gets onto the Wi-Fi and you can connect. So I think that's the key to take that in consideration.
Okay. Let's move on. I think we've only got 2 more. Let me just make sure. 3 more. We've only got like a minute. Does anybody know how to answer this question? What are the absolutely essential data feeds that support a tick?
I can answer. I would say it's less about
Where's the guy shooting at you from?
What? Who's, go ahead. Go ahead, Elaine.
I was going to say it's less about what specific data feeds and more about the information you're trying to get. And really, it's just the location of the threat and the nearest non-combatants. Because if you know those 2 things, the world's open to you. And that's basically it. Where that threat is and where the nearest combatant or non-combatant is.
I'll add to what Mr. Bale said there, and that is also where are my friendly units? A big thing that we're doing right now, and Colonel Teal can talk a lot more about it, is Blue Force tracking. Especially after the situation that happened in Africa with one of our ODAs out there, and that is, so if I know where the bad guy is, if I know where the civilians are, so I don't shoot at them, and then I need to know not just where I am, but where my buddy is to my right or my left, because maybe I hear him shooting, but maybe I don't know where he's at. And then how do I take all 3 of those data points and send them up so that way Colonel Teal, sitting back making those decisions, can figure out, hey, I'm going to send him air support, or hey, I'm going to send him another ODA or whatever, and which way that ODA needs to come in, because I don't have time to come up and call him on Iridium phone. He's got to be able to look at my dots and make that decision for me.
Should unmute myself. Let's try to get these last 2 questions answered really quick. I know we're running over time, but I want to try to answer as many questions as we can. When it comes to disastrous situations where the inside of a building could be gravely compromised, would thermal imaging from the outside, such as a drone, be more effective? There could even be an inside drone to help collaborate this so that the first responders could get the most up-to-date layout of the building. Could even be cross-referenced with blueprints. See possible fatigue points of the structure by thermal so that they know the life expectancy of the building. cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yes.
Yeah, Bob, yes, but you got to consider the depth, right? So some of that's only going to penetrate a room or a different portion in, and depending on the situation, you're going to have a lot of heat. It adds clutter, right? So if it's a non-disaster situation, that's a different backdrop than if a building collapse and a lot of thermal activity going on. So.
What about another problem that maybe sort of related is like the z-axis issue, maybe more important, or what do you think on that, Bob?
Well, since Pat's muted, yeah, so other question really is, how do you find your buddies in a vertical space and locate them and keep track of them? So, building a question here off the cuff is, consider a high rise of 50 stories, for example. You've got operators, first responders in the basement, first floor, fifth floor, 10th floor, multiple rooms. How do you know and locate where each one is, where all the teammates can basically know where their buddies are, so that z-axis, vertical situational understanding of not only where you are, but where the other friendlies are, is another key capability in this that wasn't addressed as a question. Over.
Okay. Cool. Let's see. Sort of related. I just want to get through this quickly so we can get signed off. Some ideas have indicated personal signal points, so the first responders could easily find victims. What if there are a mass number of people? This could cause jamming, so solutions into this issue may be necessary. At what scale does this cease to be viable? So I think this is about the idea about dropping like GPS tracker tiles and handing those off to individual victims or someone like in a kidnapping situation. Thoughts on this?
We currently have a pretty good method when it comes to dealing with what we call a mass CAS, or a mass casualty situation in the military. So just to kind of go over it real quick in 10 seconds, you've got one guy, usually he's your 18 Delta, and you bring him casualties, physically bring them to him, and he says, okay, and what he's got behind him is he's got a big circle with different colored chem lights at it, and then he tells you where that person goes based upon the required amount of treatment that they're going to need in that time, right? So then I carry that guy over, I set him down, there's somebody there, maybe it's me, and then I do that required work as that 18 Delta that tells me what to do. So I want you guys to think about, how do we do this digitally, right? Because this is a small area, I've got chem lights, I've got a casualty collection point, but I kind of see what you're getting onto here. And I would say if you could digitally recreate this in a way to identify those people in a building, like maybe I'm the guy with the fireman running in and I've got these casualties, and for whatever reason, I can't physically take them out. All I can do is identify where they are. Maybe I drop a point on a map with that casualty and what their life expectancy is by my brief 10-second look over, but then I have to continue on to the next casualty. So then you've got people behind you going, okay, cool. Hey man, I'm gonna take all the red dots, you take all the blue dots, you take all the green dots. And then you've got people moving in to pull those people out of the building. So that's kind of a digital way to think about it, maybe an idea to throw around. I don't really have an answer for the scale problem because I don't really think that there is one. If we have enough responders, if we can mark those people quickly, find them and identify them, we can get people in to get them out.
Okay, Bob.
It's kind of, it's a similar to that, build on that point is, the localization and identifying people vertically, right? So it's part of the same problem if you look at that from the digital perspective on this.
Brian, I think you're trying to come in.
Yeah, no, I think just to piggyback on both those comments, it all comes down to command and control. I mean, we want to do it. I mean, maybe I'm not reading the question right, but we don't want to give the victims anything. We want to control all that because, you have an active shooter or a mass casualty situation. Like, I mean, listen, my job as a New York City detective would be a lot better if it wasn't for the people of the city of New York. I mean, you just want to keep them, out of the game. Like, either we're moving them from here to here, different waypoints, whether it's a CCP or it's a active shooter to clear everyone, that command and control of where we're marking these guys, that has to be done internally, not necessarily. I mean, I've worked, Bob and I was mentioning that the whole RF stickers going through, like that's like stuff like that is great, but we want to be able to control that. I think that's just my opinion. I don't know if we want to give anything to victims, and it may not even be asking that. I may be misreading. I've been yelling at my kids on mute for the last hour, so I'm a little bit not focused.
Okay. So I think that's it for the questions that we had submitted previously. I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna move my cap off my desk. So we've got one open question during the Q&A. I'm slightly confused by this. Maybe it's just the order of operations in the question. As a general thumb, also applies to situational awareness. If looking at X system, they're not looking at Y, or do the app's functions need to be able to be swapped to run in the background? I'm gonna actually, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. So 1 second, let's see. John, if you're still here, I'm gonna give you the chance to speak. John, you wanna pose this question?
Slightly terrifying. Hello. Yes, I was just wondering about basically going back to the question of could you use a kit that's already available. So the TAC, I believe, uses an S9. Our company does a bunch of work with Android apps, not obviously in this world, but there's lots of things you can do where you might have multiple apps open. I'm just sort of wondering about how you share that, both share the processing power of the phone, but also if you're looking at one thing, it's taking up the screen, so you're not looking at another. So one of the things from the work we've done with the fire service is you're always sort of fighting for situational awareness. Basically, if someone's looking at a drone feed, they're not looking at the fire in front of them. So just trying to understand that, how you hop between different functions on an S9, and whether the full processing power is available on the S9.
With the current ATAC kits that we have in at Fifth Group, the main thing that you're going to be using it for is that ATAC feed. There's a couple other apps you can use with it with other sensors, but the problem is exactly like playing, a game on your phone. You've got a screen, you use it for that one thing, and then maybe I need to swap to a different app to get some other data. Maybe I need to swap back, or whatever I'm doing. So what we've done out of necessity is just limit it to, hey man, if I don't get an ATAC, I don't need it, because I don't have the time to swap between the two. And I think part of this challenge is to, again, if I've got 10 sensors worth of data coming in, design me something that looks at that data in an intelligent way and presents all 10 of those feeds in a way that I can look at one thing and get the whole operational picture of what I need. Piggyback on that, yeah, the current S9s are some of the ones that are used. The processing power on it, so it's designed like a normal Android phone, and the apps just simply operate on top of it as normal. But maybe experiment with a different type of phone or a different device altogether that allows it to distro that power when needed in an intelligent way. And then when we're looking at stuff like 5G, maybe I've got 10 devices on the team, and one device is really kicking ass right now because of all the sensor data it's pulling in. Have an intelligent way through that mesh network to distro that processing capability. Because if I'm over sitting here on the Sniper Hide site and I'm not really feeding any data to you, but I've got all that processing power, it's wasted. So if you need it, then have that program be intelligent enough to reach out to me and share some of that computing power and transfer it back. Because what we're talking about here now is, I don't have to carry one supercomputer with me, but if I carry 10 different computers in sort of a, let's call it, for the nerd term, a fake Beowulf cluster kind of a way, distro that computing power amongst all the devices. So you don't have to have one big ass machine. You can just simply have everybody do a little work in the background. So I can see what's going on my map. I don't know all that other process my phone's doing because I don't care. But if you can use it to make your other devices more intelligent and share that computing power, now I think that you're onto something.
Cool. Okay. So there's no more questions open.
I did have one more thing. So if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
So we know a little bit about some of the mapping. It tends to be 2D. There's a lot of crossover between some of the stuff we're trying to do with the fire service. So they've got their own command and control system that can display Google Maps, satellite maps. So one thought is that you get into some interesting problems when you try and reconcile relative track data with absolute position. So say your relative track data sort of squiggles away in a building and then suddenly you get a glancing GPS signal. It's how you kind of reconcile those things. So what we're beginning to look at is how you kind of present certainty around position. So obviously, like inertial navigation can tend to drift. So over time, there's less certainty as the accumulated error kind of happens. So I guess the question is there an existing way in the military or in the emergency services of displaying probability on those maps of like, we think someone's roughly here? And also, what would that do to, I guess, to kind of command and control? It seems like something you deal with as part of your jobs, as part of your roles.
One of the ways that we deal with that problem, because GPS is naturally, it's not unreliable, but it's not very specific. It's really great for a commander on the battlefield to see generally where his troops are, because he doesn't know Colonel Teal doesn't need to know the exact meter box I'm standing in 99% of the time. He just needs to get a general idea that, hey, I know within a 50-meter square or 100-meter square where Tim's team is. That way he can provide that continued command and control. There are a couple, so inside the Army, what we use, especially for JTAC related stuff, the Air Force, well, actually all the branches use this because we use a unified joint pub, but it's a CAT system. It's called a category grid system, which is just simply a scale that we say, hey, this grid I've given you is within this amount of reliability. It may be off half of a meter, it may be off 100 meters. So that's one way. So that way when we're passing information, we know right up front, how reliable is this? So a solution to that I've seen in the tech world, like you're talking about with the fire department, would be something like, hey, I've got this nice Google Maps, but that's a general area, and my GPS dot is never going to be actually where I am. So, maybe if I've got several different units out there operating inside this 10-story building, and they're using network timing specific protocol, so that way they understand at what the timing between each other are, then they can triangulate each other's positions, and then you can have a no shit real world, hey, I've got 10 dots on an X, Y, and a Z axis, and because that mesh network is communicating and it's computing that based upon the time it takes to make all those hops between each other, I know exactly where those guys are. And then piggybacking on that, if I've got an actual building plan, now I can tell where I'm at. Something as simple as creating, we call it an initial GPS point. So you walk up to this building where Google Maps is, right? And then you literally put your GPS on a corner that you can clearly see from the sky. And then I simply move my map to where it matches my dot, lock it in place. And now my reliability, now if I'm in the room on the map, I'm actually in the room on the map. Because what I've done is I've correlated my actual GPS coordinate with my map instead of letting it auto do it. Because if you auto do it, it's always off. I hope that answers that question.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
That was ridiculous. Thank you very much. Incredible.
That's what Tim does. So we brought him to another hackathon by accident, and he just kind of took over.
You just missed me. Don't lie.
Anybody else want to weigh on that? Otherwise, we're 15 minutes over time. I think we've lost a bunch of people over the time, but I appreciate all of you who've stuck around with us, and hopefully this has been really informative for you. But I'll throw this out there. Any last from the mentors, any last minute thoughts that you want to throw out?
I'm going to talk one more time and I won't talk anymore, Justin, I promise. Hey guys, bring us your batshit crazy Star Wars solutions, man. I mean, if you're sitting with somebody and you're talking over a beer or you're talking over Jitsi or whatever you're using, and you're like, man, I think I got a solution to this problem. You pitch it and somebody's like, that is insane. Don't worry about it. Bring it up. Ask somebody, ask one of the mentors. And then what they can do is they can take this really way out there in space idea that you've got and give you a little bit of information on it to maybe bring it down into something that's a little bit easier to manage and control and may actually be a solution. So I don't want you to never tell yourself no. Let one of us do that. Okay? Don't assess yourself. I'm done. I promise.
I second the motion on that.
Hey, Justin, can I throw one more thing out
there?
Yeah,
go for it, Matt.
Just kind of reiterate everything that's been said. Remember, when you're building these things, it's kind of assessed on a spectrum. Where on one end you have capability, and the other hand, and I'm sure the operators will tell me that my terminology is awful, but you have deployment. So if you get a 50% increase in capability, but it's a 60% burden in deployment, you know, carrying it or trucking it or adding it to your ruck, and that's not great. But if it's a 30% increase in capability and maybe a 10% increase to your deployment, that's a 20% increase overall. It's that net. It's not one or the other. It's kind of a trade game when we assess these things. Is you can't just look at one side of it. It's everything's taken into account, and you know, if we can get something, if we can net something in the end, I think we'll be good.
Cool. Okay. So with that, I'm going to bring us to a close because we've been here for 2 hours now, at least the mentors have. So what I would encourage everybody to do, if you have outstanding questions still, you know, let's get on the DIN, you know, the innovatedefense.net/DUE/challenge. It's all in the emails that you've received. Get on Microsoft Teams. You can find information about that on the DIN. Post some questions, start talking to people. Let's have some conversations, get started. We'd love to see you guys on there participating tonight, this weekend. We're going to keep this thing running until June 28th. We'll start hosting some more AMAs going forward. This seems to be pretty good. What I'll try to do is maybe have a few questions that we would start off with, and then open it up to the participants to start asking more questions, so we can try to get a little bit more interactive. Because I know that was a lot of us talking to you, and not necessarily really two-way communication on this one. So hopefully in the future we'll have something a little bit more back and forth. But with that, I want to thank you all for coming and attending. Hopefully this was useful, and go off and make something new. So with that, I'm calling us done. And thanks everybody for taking the time. See ya.